So I just got back from a walk with my dog. We did 1 mile, 1.43 miles. That's 3,393 steps, 228 calories, and we did it. The clock is still running at 33:26. Of course, we stopped a couple minutes ago, so it was probably about 31 minutes. I want to clarify something I said in the previous video about if a person who is this Eradicator Silent Knight, that's his full title because it's Eradicator Armor, and he if he would think something, if he would think, the sky is blue, then that would be on the television. So I said it was masking his speech. So I said that if he said I'm going to kill the president, then they would say it on the closed caption on the television. It's actually meant to mask his thoughts. So if he says in his head the sky is blue, then on the television it would say the sky is blue. And he uses this to his advantage by using his brain as a projector, as a where think of it like a Jedi mind trick. If I was going to if we're if there are a whole bunch of cameras in a security store, he's gonna project from his brain a person, and they're gonna walk around the store and pick up items. And he's doing this with his mind. So he's standing maybe in the corner and he's projecting this image, and other people, it'll catch their attention. I better make this one private because I don't want you to confuse my character with myself, right? Basically, if you know the story of the Butchers of North Shore, it starts off with Silent Night, who is Matthew Joya. I changed the character's name to Nate Ruel later on. Ruel is derivative of Jewel, and Jewel is part of my last name, Joya. Joya means joy, or it means jeweler. So, so he's in the first part of this story. He's a healthcare lobbyist, and he's pushing he's part of a medical device company, and he's pushing for medical reform through Congress. And basically, he's told it's a go. And then they say, you know what, we're gonna, allocate the funds for an energy reform bill. And he felt that this was, he was stabbed in the back. That something that would benefit a lot of people is now being used to fill the pockets of greedy politicians. And basically, he's blacklisted from society. He retires from his company. He sits on his wealth, but he's basically blacklisted by the government. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of assassinations being carried out in his name, and it's made to look like it's him. And it turns out at the end of the season, it's his girlfriend. But later on, the story morphs into where he becomes obsessed with the celestial in the sky. And what you see is this armor. Originally, he's wearing this helmet that's tethered to his technology. He has these two balls, Stuntman Mike and Zoe, where he can destroy the environment. Remember, I said this was a story intended for young adults. It's a fantasy thing. It's inspired somewhat by MOBA gameplay. So he has short range defense. So think of it like it's why are they destroying towers in the Nexus and in League of Legends? So he has these two balls that he's tethered. I didn't play that much in League of Legends, by the way. He has these two balls that he's tethered to, and there's a scene where I always flip flop between the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, and part of my juggling of the two buildings was I didn't know what I know those buildings are iconic, and I know what they look like, but I don't know the building that sits across from them. And basically, the way it had to be was Amy's in one of the buildings, sit up in this perched in a sniper position, and Matt is in the building across the way, and he's going to use stuntman Mike and Zoe to saw the building in half, and the top of the building falls down to the street below. So I think I finally settled on the Chrysler Building, um, and I was in the city recently, and I saw the skyline, and it actually makes more sense because it looks like there's more buildings across the street from the Chrysler Building, and although in my head I'm replaying it, I might have used the Empire State Building more often. Um, but Amy's in there. She's got a mask on. She's got her hair in a ponytail. She's in this black kind of suit, and she's got this plasma railgun. She's painting a target across the way, and basically Matt comes up and he uses those two balls to saw the building in half. Eventually, later on in that season, there's a chase on the LIE. Matt hijacks a Porsche. I remember spending a great length of time, a lot of hours trying to figure out what car he was going to hijack because I didn't want to use a Ferrari, I didn't want to use a Lamborghini. So he's basically kind of like near the Meadowbrook, I guess, on Long Island, and he's going through a parking lot and he comes across a car, and it's a car that he's going to hijack and drive on the Southern State. So I tried to think of a car that would be a driving machine, and I've never driven a Porsche. I used to hate Porsches. I used to pass by this Porsche Boxster. I don't know if this is due to it being a convertible, but I never liked the aesthetics of it. And but I heard that the Porsche is like the perfectly balanced driving machine, and a lot of drivers like it. So it's basically a Porsche GT3 and a 911 GT3, and it's basically the 20 somewhere between 2012 and 2014, that version, and it's a white car. Um, so he hijacks this. If Silent Night in the story is blind, he has his eyes gouged from his head, but he does have a way of seeing the road, his technology in his helmet, and here he's using a blindfold that has that technology built into it, where basically it's rendering the road in front of him. And this was before I saw how Teslas work, but think of it like that. And it's like a blue rendering of the environment, very kind of like pixelated, like I don't know. But there's this highway chase, and Amy's involved. Eventually, Amy captures Matt and puts him in captivity. His right arm is cut off, and he's held in confinement, and he becomes tethered to his technology, and without the use of his helmet. So, in the previously, he needed his helmet to control those balls and some of his other technology. Now he's tethered to his satellite in space, and he's tethered to those balls, and he uses those to escape from confinement. And basically, the final season, because I did think of this as a episodic show on like HBO or Netflix. Of course, I don't have the ability to produce that, so it would have been producing a graphic novel or a manga. But um, it was the final season basically becomes this pre-apocalyptic thing where he's hell bent on killing all the light pollution on the world, and there are people who are interfering with his plans. And he, in the final scene, he plunges a carbon strip katana through the belly of Amy, and now he's going to make contact with the Celestial. And it's not named what the Celestial is in the story, but in the next story, it's Cosmos. So there's a final scene where he's on this perch on this mountain, and there's the ocean nearby, and he's overwhelmed with relief, where he's looking up into the day-lit sky, so it's daytime, and he's ready to make contact with the celestial. And so basically, he's tethered to his technology in space. Later on, many years later, like 6 years after I developed the story, I thought perhaps this should have been a thing where it was actually his satellite that he was chasing rather than a celestial. He was basically chasing his own tail, and it could have been like a parable for the consequences of technology or something. But um, obviously, in real life, I don't have a plan to kill all the light pollution on Earth. I do have involvement in healthcare, so the character is an adaptation of me, so he shares some of the similar likes, dislikes, and career aspirations. So my medical device technology that I wanted to build in the real world was an internal blood monitoring system. In the story, he's involved with more, I feel, more lucrative technologies. These are laser driven surgical equipment, so a lot of optics where it has precision cuts. And he also uses this in defense contracting for the government as anti nuclear technology. He's a, he's a defense guy. And so at the time I was writing this, I had the first season, I um, I intended his lover, the female protagonist, to be a schizophrenic hallucination of Matt, or leave. No, it was supposed to leave the audience in suspense, where he only interacted with Amy, where the audience might say, "Is Amy real?" Because you only see Amy when Matt's present. There's nobody else in the room. But eventually, I scrapped that idea. So this is where he sort of becomes the anti-hero because he's a very philanthropic person. He's interested in the well-being of other people. He builds these technologies to assist in healthcare. He's very um, he wants to implement reduction of harm measures, quality control measures. He's not a greedy piggy. He spends a lot of his money on R&D. So um, rather than have a mansion and a Ferrari and stuff, he spends his own personal finances on his own research. And so the female protagonist, Amy, he she spends money on mansions and stuff. What's going on? Why are you coming in and cool off? So I've actually talked about this story in my doctoral studies. So let me see if I can find it. I go to classes, and I know I have mentioned story development, and it had to be last year. So I don't know if I go to I would have to sift through a lot of this stuff. But if I go to like the discussions, um, I know I make mention of some of my characters in this thing, and I'm looking somewhere. I have a Word document that has some of the synopsises of some of my stories. Some of them are under development. Like there's a story that I have, rural New York story set in 1930s. It's a story about a guy who has a dead wife, except he doesn't realize that she's dead. He sees her walking around town, and the whole town knows that she's dead, but they don't clue him in. They kind of let him live in this delusion. And in the end, he becomes a problem for the company that he's working for. He's basically like a runner for the mob, except he's not a criminal. Um, and I have two endings. One ending where it turns out it was the mother of the wife that kills the mother because she's jealous because she wants to be in a relationship with this guy. And then there's one where it's revealed that I guess that he killed her or something. They basically dig up the body, and I remember using Steve Buscemi for this. Um, Avril Lavigne played the female protagonist in this story, so she plays the dead wife. This was when I was 14 years old. I started working on the story. I was at Chaminade High School in band, and we were playing Henry Mancini's Moon River. And Moon River kind of was the score for the development of this story. And it was under development. I never really went through with it. I moved on to other projects, and none of these. I never really wrote about any of these things. Um, and this is I don't know if people have this issue where, like in my head, there's a difference between fantasy, daydreaming, and story development. So if I'm daydreaming or if I'm fantasizing in my head, I might fantasize about playing for the NFL, and that's a fantasy. That's not involved in any of my stories. None of my characters are in the NFL. They might be, you know, in sports, but that's a fantasy. And but when I do story development, like this wasn't something that I was fantasizing about. I was attracted to Avril Lavigne, but she just served as a character model in the story. She has no speaking lines. There's really no interaction with the male and the female, and other than he sees her on a trolley, and of course I am the male protagonist in that story. So maybe that's why I'm speaking about fantasies. I have like a bomber jacket on, and this is my knowledge. I keep saying it's like a 1930s rural New York thing, like I think Indiana Jones, and he had like that leather jacket on. But I don't know if this would be the 40s, the 20s, or the 30s. You know, American history is not one I am. I have no interest in American history. Like it just bores me to tears. My mother, she likes Victorian and colonial and stuff. I find colonial architecture to be boring. I find American history to be boring. Um, I guess their attire is, back in the day when you had kings and queens, you had these, and knights, you had medieval armor, you had these Gothic cathedrals and flying buttresses and stained glass, and you had the Roman architecture and the Roman aqueducts and the Colosseum and Greek architecture and all that stuff. I just found, I know some colonial stuff is inspired from, the Greek pantheon and stuff. You see these pillars where they have, it's like an homage to Greek society, but it's very, revolutionary to me. The old trench coat or whatever you call those coats that they used to wear, George Washington wore, and all that stuff. It's just so when we get to like the 1900s and stuff, it's just not a time that I spend too much time in. I don't know, but I remember working on this when I was living in Fort Collins. I was writing up all my short stories. Another short story, or another story I worked on, and I wouldn't describe that as a short story. Long story. It's a story that was never developed. Another story I developed was a story called Misfits, which was adapted from Fred Durst's idea about the Columbine shootings. So basically, this became a thing like, how do you write a story about the Columbine shootings. So basically, it became like a John Hughes thing, where it's high school life, and basically, my character is basically kind of like the guardian to the kid who eventually shoots up the school. I wasn't overly popular in school, so my character is not overly popular in the story, but he does serve as the buffer that prevents this kid from shooting up the school. So what happens to my character is he goes to a party, and I'm supposed to give the audience the illusion that he drove home drunk. He dies in a car crash, but actually, there's a scene where he puts a bottle down. He never takes a drink. He drives home, and he's actually killed by a drunk driver. So after his death, the guy, he's the guy who shoots up the school is picked on by the bullies and stuff, and he shoots up the school. I scrapped this because this was my senior year of high school that I started working on this, and when I went to college, like college was like there's so much more to stress about in college. I felt, and around the time I went to college, there were some shootings on campuses, and I felt it was something to write about for that setting instead. But I just abandoned it. I never worked on it. I don't want to make that sound like I was stressed out about college life. I had the intro, and basically I used my classmates as the scenery for this. So Eddie Pierre Paul and some of my classmates that I was in French class with and stuff, and I had the intro to the song "Thoughtless." Is that it by Korn? Which I guess at the time I tried to avoid cliches, and that's why my story that followed up that, the one that I call the Philadelphia Project, which is the one I describe as grounded in reality. I love this because I tried to avoid as many character tropes and um, cliches as possible. And since it's a story adapted from my life, I feel that it's very original. Whether it's a good story or not, I probably have to go over it again. But I was telling it to my mother, and when I was saying some things out loud, I said, you know what, that's stupid. I might change that. Saying it to another person made me feel self conscious about it, and I might want to, change the way it's described in the story. Um, but I used the female character, Amy McFadden, as the. She's my. I use her on when I did systems of psychotherapy. So I have this mock therapy thing, and I have the she's the patient. When I go over my I was told that they don't use axes anymore. I don't see real patients yet.